Welcome to Tool Time at Kitchen Conservatory. One of the most important tools for cake decorators and bakers are pastry tips, sometimes known as pastry tubes. We have 109 different sizes and shapes of pastry tips and tubes. And why are they different? Because sometimes you want to make a little fine line like a number 000 tip. Other times you want to have a tip that can make you grass, for instance, or they have tips that make hearts, even tips for Christmas trees. It's amazing what a skilled decorator can do with all these tips. The tips come in small, which is fine detailed work, or we have all these large tips, and the large tips come in lots of different sizes, and the trick to it is that, well, here's a plain tip which ends in a number 0. This is tip number 800. So 801 is a little larger, 802 is a little larger, 803, so on, all the way to 809 is the largest of the plain tip. And then we have star tip, which have the same kind of numbering system, and then the closed star tip, and then the fine French star tip, which has a lot more points in it than the regular star, and then a couple of other interesting large tips like basket weave tip, which makes all kinds of interesting. So how do you do with these pastry tips? What you do is you use a pastry bag, and although there is available canvas reusable pastry bags, the problem that nobody likes is then you have to wash them. So we have pastry bags, disposable pastry bags in plastic, in 2 different sizes, 12 inches and 18 inches. Now, some people may say, well, I just use a regular old Ziploc bag and that does it. Well, it really doesn't, because a Ziploc bag is square and you need a triangular shaped bag so that when you squeeze your icing, it doesn't go into the wrong corner. It goes straight out through the tip. So the beauty of these bags is you cut the bag to fit the tip you're doing. So if you're doing a small tip, you just cut it like this, and then you can slide in your small tip. And the most popular tip of all, the one that we sell hundreds and hundreds every year, is tip number 2. And people love tip number 2 because that is the best for making fine lines on cookies. So you pop your tip in on the inside of the bag, and that holds it. Cowever, if you're doing fine detailed work, you can see it's a little floppy in there. And that's when decorators use what's known as a coupler. And a coupler is a 2-part piece, and so part 1 goes inside the bag, and because this is a little wider, you may have to cut the bag again to fit the coupler, but you can always, can't make the bag go smaller, but you can certainly make the bag hole go larger. One of the advantages of using the coupler is that then you can change the tip without changing what's on the inside of the bag. And you see I screw in over the pastry bag the tip. It's secure, and I'm not going to lose any icing outside the bag. If you're just doing whipped cream or mashed potatoes, it doesn't really matter. But if you want to make a decorating with icing, and this is buttercream icing, it's very important that it doesn't ooze out the side and make a mark on your perfectly beautiful decorated cookie. So I'm just going to put in a little bit of my buttercream icing into the bag. If you notice, I made a cuff, and I made the cuff because that enables me to not mess up the end of the bag. And then you never want to put more in the bag than you can easily handle. And I push this down, and I can then, this is just a number 2 line, but then you can make, this is the perfect thing for, say, writing happy birthday on a cookie or on a cake for fine detailed work. And you can see how you just kind of let it fall, and it's just does a beautiful job for doing that fine line. Oops, I got a little bit of outside I missed on that. But one of the, here's another trick about using the pastry bag. You notice how I squeezed from the top, but yet I still got a little bit of icing on that side. That's where the bench knife comes in. And I always use the bench knives to scrape down, to push it down, and to get the icing back in. So with my pastry bag here, by using the coupler, I'm able to unscrew this tip. And I'll show you another tip that's very popular. This is known as a Bismarck tube. And I can put that tip on here and squeeze it on. The Bismarck tube actually comes in 3 different sizes. And the reason why you do it, and here are the other two sizes of Bismarck tubes. The reason why you use a Bismarck tube is when you want to fill something like a donut or an eclair, you're able to stick it in a certain amount into it, and then you can get the icing, the filling inside, and you can see how it comes out in the Bismarck tube, which is really great. And then now I like to use the 12-inch pastry bags for small detail work because I can hold it and secure it. But if you're doing whipped cream on a cake or mashed potatoes for Duchess potatoes, the 18-inch are great. And what I like to use on those is a really large pastry tip. Like, here's the star. This is number 829. And then I get a beautiful swirl of whipped cream or mashed potatoes. And the point of having the nice big tip is that if there's a little chunk of mashed potato that isn't quite smooth, it won't get clogged up. So it's easier to use a big tip for that. We do have couplers for the big tips. There are two different size couplers. There's a medium one and then the large one. The large coupler works in tips that end in 7, 8, or 9 because those are the largest tips. And so this is how everything that goes in a pastry bag will always look more attractive than if you try to spoon it on. That you have control, and if you use a fluted tip, you have design. It's so much harder to make a smooth, round thing perfectly smooth. Ridges always make a much prettier, attractive design for anybody in the pastry business. We make cooking fun at Kitchen Conservatory.